All right, hello. My name is Cooper Locke. This is my investigative object project, and we're going to be looking at a piece by Banksy. So we're just going to kind of jump into it, all right? Art has been used for millennia to describe and depict the feelings of a time or the feelings of an artist regarding a time or event. This effective power to vocalize an opinion without words has also been used by artists to protest, to try and open the eyes of its viewers to possible corruption, lies, or other scandalous acts. A commonly known modern example of this is the street artist Banksy, and specifically his work depicting government watchmen wiretapping a public phone booth that we're going to see in the next slide, right? Well, not the next slide. But all of this leads us to our thesis statement, right? So our thesis for this is that the satirically subversive concept and style of graffiti allows the works to directly connect to the feelings of those who are actively protesting or upset with a government or situation, making this medium, graffiti, extremely effective in appealing to the target audience. So we're going to kind of go into that, tear that apart, and really pick out all the pieces and explain that using the works of Banksy and some other works. So let's just hop right into that and actually finally get to see the work that we're investigating. So this is our base piece. This is the main investigative piece by Banksy, right? As we can see, it says graffiti depicting government watchmen listening into a phone booth. As I said, the name is rough. There is no serious name, and it's actually been defaced in recent years by who knows who. Um, but the concept is all still there and it's there in pictures. So obviously, as we can see, there are government watchmen, spies, whatever you want to call them, surrounding a phone booth using what is pretty obviously seen as surveillance hardware. So they're listening into your conversation, all that kind of deal. This is a site-specific work on an actual phone booth on an actual place with an actual white wall behind it. Now it also has the actual Watchmen there. And so the funny satirical aspect to it that Banksy really likes to use, that I enjoy personally a whole lot, was that he did this piece actually in Gloucestershire, that I'm sure I butchered that name, in the United Kingdom, which is actually really close to the home of the government communications headquarters. And so what the government communications headquarters is it's pretty much like um, it's like the NSA for us in the United States. They focus on communication, and what they say they do is that they protect law enforcement, military, Her Majesty's government, and the people via communication. Um, I wouldn't say surveillance, that's a little too obvious, but that might be happening and probably is. And that's kind of what Banksy is using to depict here. Um, and in recent years, we've seen that government surveillance doesn't just affect foreign adversaries or foreign governments. It is leaking into our own lives every day, and that's what Banksy's really showing here in his little graffiti style. Is that this public phone booth that anyone can use is still being watched, whether you're saying anything bad or not. You're always being watched, right? And no matter how true that is, no matter how much how close you are to a 1984 style Big Brother um, concept, still there, right? And it still comes back into the thesis. We see this other times, and we've seen it throughout history, obviously, but recently there's a really good example during the Arab Spring that happened in the Middle East. Um, we'll look at a couple examples there. We'll see it on the next slide. So this slide shows a piece, also not quite named, but we'll call it Revolution is in Our Veins. The citation's there on the side, but we'll just call it Revolution is in Our Veins. What this piece is it's roughly the same as the Banksy piece. We can see that there are paintings of someone imprisoned. We can see a TV that seems to be blacked out. And in the Arab Spring, the government shut down the internet. They blacked it out so that there was no outdoor communication, right? And that kind of kicked off the whole deal. So the Egyptian people protest and they fought for their rights back, whether it was access to information, and that spread all the way throughout multiple Arab nations, right? And we all know the current events of that. So let's get back into the art. Now, way this really pulls back into our main idea is that, especially in these Egyptian countries, Arabic countries, right, the government is going to be very crackdowny on these artists, right? There's not as much efficacy to free speech as there are in other places, and even in the freest country in the world, the United States, if someone is going to throw things up like this, that's really tearing down the government, and especially if it was in a time of revolution, I guarantee you that the government would be very upset, even in a place where it is in our Constitution. And so that is what kind of trickles back down into it, showing, how it's going to be extremely effective in appealing to the target audience. And in this case, the target audience is the revolters, the protesters, the freedom fighters, whatever you want to call it, depending on what side you're on, right? And this piece and the next piece, which I think really ties it together, really brings in that connection to the feelings, the raw emotions of the protesters and how they connect from artist to protester, right? We see it again big time in this one, in the street art in Cairo, Egypt, again in the Arab Spring, right? So what happened here was the government put up a wall on the street to defend it and to keep the protesters out, right? It's a classic move. If you want to keep someone out, you put up a wall. It's simple. We do it in everyday life. You put up a fence, you put up a wall, all that kind of thing. So the Egyptian government pushed this on the people, and this is an excellent example of how the artist really connected with the risks of the protesters, right? The artist here went to the actual infrastructure that is trying to hold back the protesters and painted on it, and he showed his risk and he put himself out there. I think this work really brings it together. It really shows that artist is also taking risks during this revolutionary time. Not only are the people possibly going to be thrown in jail or have their rights taken away just by trying to fight for their rights, is the artist is now feeding this flame as a feeling of camaraderie, because the artist is putting themselves on the line, just like the protesters are. And I think that's why this style of graffiti artwork, this, the subversive but silent yet loud, screaming voice of the people is so effective in these times of protest and these times of challenging, is because the artist himself or herself is also out there taking a shared risk, and that really makes it sink in with the people. It really makes it sink in with the viewer, whether you're actually there or whether you're sitting on a computer in the United States watching it happen. You're like, wow, look at this. And I think that's why this graffiti is so effective. Here's our bibliography, and thanks for listening.